And so we have also seen the conversation that took place between Prime Minister Albanese and President Trump, the idea that perhaps we're seeing an exemption under consideration. How do you view the looming threat of trade tensions, of tariffs, and how that potentially continues to impact confidence, which, you know, in a lot of business sectors is already fragile?
Well, hello, great to be with you. Look, it's a very important question, and obviously I think we, like everybody else, we're taking this one step at a time. Things are very fluid. We're seeing that there was a conversation earlier today between Prime Minister Albanese and President Trump. Things sounded hopeful coming out of that discussion. Of course, since then, we've heard that the President has signed the executive order and that there is an across-the-board tariff to be applied on aluminium and steel. So I think there's a degree of uncertainty about what the final detail will be. Obviously, from a business point of view, our preference is that we keep those markets as open and as free as possible. There's not necessarily huge direct trade for Australia in those items. We're exporting around $400 million Australian each in steel and in aluminium. So, look, there's a direct impact. The bigger issue is what happens in the supply chain. Obviously, there's uncertainty. I think at this point, let's see the dust settle. Let's see what the final detail is. We urge, I think, the US administration to proceed with caution. But we understand that, you know, we're operating in an environment where things can change from minute to minute.
Right, in that sense that, you know, businesses are to that extent really at the mercy of diplomacy and, you know, what decisions are being made around across the other side of the world. But when it comes to what policies can do domestically, obviously we're just really kind of waiting for a date when it comes to the federal election, but we're headed to that vote. What would you like to see from the major parties when it comes to, you know, what could be considered really compelling and transformative business-oriented policies?
Look, that's very important for business, and I think what our signal to the major parties in Australia, whoever will form the next government, we do want to see a level of ambition. We understand that there are fundamental challenges that the Australian economy has to address. You know, productivity is absolutely at the top of that agenda. You know, we've made some progress on inflation. That's good. We've still got a very strong labour market. That's also very good. But if we're going to really have sustainable improvements in living standards, if we're going to get to the position where I think a lot of people aspire to be, then we've got to fundamentally, you know, address productivity. Part of that is getting the budget in order federally. We're heading back into structural deficit. To be competitive, you know, we need to look at things like tax reform. It's been a quarter of a century since anyone seriously attempted tax reform in Australia. We're talking about what President Trump is doing on tariffs now, but the next thing that he could do could be on company tax in the US. That's somewhere on his agenda. In Australia, we need to be competitive in that space again if we're going to attract investment. So those are the fundamental priorities. The other issue, if I can say, in Australia, which we're really struggling with at the moment, and that's the impact of compliance, red tape, regulation, that's having a huge impact on many businesses. You know, whether it's red tape or green tape, we're really seeing across small business and large business that that's a bigger issue than it's ever been before.
Andrew, how about the impact of the rate environment? Is there anything that businesses in Australia want to see from the Reserve Bank of Australia? We have that decision next week.
Well, it will be a critical moment. And from a small business view in particular, obviously, the sooner we can get to the position where the Reserve Bank is confident to start cutting interest rates again, then the better it will be. Will that be next week? Honestly, we don't know. It's very hard to say whether or not they are prepared to you know, give full credit for the reductions that we've seen in inflation to date. On, you know, a superficial reading, that core inflation measurement is still just a little bit above their target band. It's heading in the right direction. A lot of progress has been made, but are they ready to make that cut? You know, obviously from a business point of view, the sooner that can happen, then the better it will be.
The Australian economy, of course, heavily intertwined with how China does as well. We have seen the trade war starting to ignite, especially with more back and forth between the U.S. and China. How important is it for Australia to stay out of that? We have seen, of course, the latest problems between China and Australia as well during the first Trump administration.
Well, I think the good thing in terms of our trading relationship with China is that we've made significant progress in the past 1 to 2 years, where we've seen a range of the direct trade measures that they were applying to Australia have been lifted step by step. So that's been I think a positive direction in helping to restore some confidence in the direction of that relationship. But China is our largest bilateral trading partner. That's not going to change. There's been a lot of talk about diversification into different markets, into India and into the Middle East with the US itself. Of course, if we get into a situation where the rules-based order is really going out the window and we end up with a much more confrontational trade environment, well, that's not going to be good for anybody. Australia is at risk in those circumstances as a sort of a medium-sized open economy reliant very much on our trade partnerships. So obviously we've got a lot invested in that, and those relationships are important. We don't want to be collateral damage, in a big fight between the global giants in the trade world.